Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Hi, I'm Sean Alexander, founder of E412 International. Welcome to this episode of Words in the Word, a series where we take a look at key biblical terms and concepts in order to gain a better understanding of their meaning, their history, and their significance. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the word law, or the term the law of God, or the law of Moses. We're going to see what that word really means. Now, just as a disclaimer up front, this is a very vast subject with a lot of differing opinions and a lot of complexity to it. I'm not going to pretend to cover all of these subjects in this one video. What we do want to do is lay the framework for the discussion. If we don't understand what a term really means, how can we articulate or how can we formulate a very balanced and well-informed opinion about its role in our life, about our relationship to it, all the things that go along with discussing this concept? It really begins, in my opinion, with understanding the word itself. So join us today as we discuss this very important biblical concept called the law of God. I'd like to start the discussion of this word law by going back to the passage that we already read, Psalms 1, 1 and 2, and look at it from a couple different translations. The CEV says it like this: God blesses those people who refuse evil advice and won't follow sinners or join in sneering at God. Instead, they find happiness in the teaching of the Lord and they think about it day and night. The HCSB says it like this: How happy is the man who does not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path of sinners, or join a group of mockers. Instead, his delight is in the Lord's instruction, and he meditates on it day and night. Okay, so far we've read three different translations, and we've seen three different terms emerge for this concept, law. Law, teaching, and instruction. But I'd like to make a quick point here if I can. And that is that any time that we read the English Bible, any English translation, obviously I like some better than others, some are more accurate than others, in my opinion, but anytime we read any English version, what we're reading is really an interpretation, not a straight translation. Okay, when we translate something, it's not like a computer-generated thing where we put in data and it spits out precise, mathematically precise information back to us. When translators translate a Bible, or any document for that matter, there are certain decisions that inevitably have to be made, and it becomes an interpretation based on those translators' opinions of what the writer is trying to say, the context of the word, and what the meaning is really trying to get at. Now, these translators, of course, are extremely intelligent. They're extremely educated and competent in their field. I'm not trying to denigrate or take anything away from them. All I'm saying is that when there is a questionable word that not everybody agrees it has an exact interpretation or a meaning, decisions have to be made. And those decisions are based on opinions, and those opinions, if we're not careful, sometimes let in the translators' doctrines and pre-existing beliefs about what something means. So if we really want to become true students of the Word and really understand what God is trying to tell us, it's good to go back to the original language. Now, if you're like me, you don't read the original language. You're not able to read biblical Greek and Hebrew. But what we do have, thanks to technology, is an abundance of material that helps us understand these things. There's commentaries, there's Bible dictionaries, there's all kinds of things. The best, in my opinion, the simplest and easiest first place to look is the Strong's Concordance. So if we look at all these things and dig deeper behind the meaning of words, then we start to better understand what God is trying to tell us through his infallible written word. So let's go on and actually look at what this word law really means in the Hebrew. If we look up this word law, we see that in the Hebrew language, the word is actually Torah or Torah. And a better understanding, or the actual definition of that word Torah, is instruction or direction, or some say teaching. So it comes from the concept, the root word comes from the concept of aiming something or shooting something. So this is why when we sin, we're actually missing the mark. It means our aim was off. We didn't aim correctly. We didn't hit the target that we were aimed at. All these concepts are related in the Hebraic understanding. So now the different translations that we read, they're starting to make sense, right? One has law, one has teaching, one has instruction. So what we're understanding is that that's really what it means. The different translators went with those different words because those are a better understanding. That's a better definition or translation of the word Torah from Hebrew into English. It's not so much law as it is teaching or instruction. So now let's take a look at other places in the book of Psalms where this word law or Torah is mentioned. Now these are just a few of the examples. There's many. Psalm 19:7. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. Now, what if we read it this way? The instruction of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. I delight to do your will, O God. Your instruction is within my heart. Psalms 40, verse 8. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Give me understanding that I may keep your instruction and observe it with my whole heart. Lead me in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. I will keep your teaching continually, forever and ever, and I shall walk in a wide place, for I have sought your precepts. The teaching of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. Oh, how I love your instruction. It is my meditation all the day. 7 times a day I praise you for your righteous rules. Great peace have those who love your instruction. Nothing can make them stumble. I long for your salvation, O Lord, and your instruction is my delight. So to steal a line from my teacher, everybody wants to dance like David danced, but nobody wants to love what David loved. We see all throughout the Psalms, and these are just a few examples that I've included. Go look them up for yourself. We see all throughout the Psalms that David loves the Torah. He loves the instruction of God. It's not so much the law that we have to obey and have to rebel against. It's a different concept to David. His understanding was that it was a blessing. David loved it. He enjoyed it. He thanked God. It brought him peace. It brought him stability. It kept him from stumbling. Your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. All these concepts we start to understand once we shift away from, in my opinion, it's a poor translation to say law. When we say Torah instead, or understand that it really means instruction, that begins to shift our mindset too, I believe. We start to see that it's not something that's necessarily negative in connotation, but instruction is, hey, that's something I can get along with. That's something that I can walk in to please God, and that will keep me walking safely. It'll keep me walking in prosperity. It'll keep me walking in blessing, in the favor of God. It becomes an opportunity instead of an obligation. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, before we can really formulate a really informed opinion on any subject, but on this particular subject, before we can pass judgment on the law, or listen to somebody else's judgment and opinions on it, I think it's very, very helpful to understand what we're really talking about. It's really important to understand what are we really dealing with before we say, no, that's done away with, or yeah, that's for. We have to understand, what are we really talking about. So I have to admit, I up until a few years ago when I really started studying the subject, I didn't understand what Torah was all about. I didn't understand what the law was. My mind went straight to sacrifices, or I had a concept that it was bondage somehow, or legalism, or that it had been done away with. Jesus did it all for me, so I didn't have to. These were some of the things that I had in my mind, but I had never really even, it never occurred to me that, hey, maybe I should go back and find out what the law actually is. What are we talking about when we say the law? What is that? It never occurred to me to check. So let's look deeper at what Torah means and what it meant to the writers of the Bible, the New Testament, and what it meant to Jesus. Remember that Jesus was thoroughly Jewish. So were his apostles. And so if we want to understand what they're saying, maybe it would help us to get in their mind frame instead of making them fit a 21st century American mindset and interpreting their words the way that we think. It's really good if we can go back and understand the way they thought about the terms that they used. The Old Testament, the Torah, the writings, the prophets, the Psalms, all that. The Old Testament was the only Bible they ever had or knew of. So let's go back and see. Let's continue studying this and see what's really going on when we say Torah or instruction. According to the Jewish understanding, Torah can really refer to one of two things. Either the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We also call this in the Greek, we call it the Pentateuch. So that's the first thing that Torah can mean, the first 5 books. Or the second one is the set of 613 specific commandments, or in Hebrew, mitzvot, enumerated by God on Mount Sinai. These 613 commandments are broken down into 3 categories called judgments, statutes, and testimonies, or ordinances. There are positive commandments, which tell us what to do, and negative commandments, which tell us what not to do. The so-called 10 commandments, or the 10 utterances in Judaism, the 10 words, the 10 sayings, they're given as sort of categories that encompass all the specific rules and regulations in the 613. The first 5 of the 10 commandments, the first tablet, deals with our relationship with God. The second 5 deal with our relationship with man. Jesus summed up these 2 overall categories as love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, this was completely in line with Jewish thought at the time about how to simplify the complexity of so many commandments, the 613 commandments. How do we reduce that down, or how do we categorize it? How do we begin to understand and process it? It's by love God and love your neighbor. There was a rabbi, a man named Hillel. Rabbi Hillel lived from around 110 BC to maybe even as late as 10 AD. And he was once asked if he could teach the Torah, the entire Torah, while standing on one foot. Here's what he replied. That which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That is the entire Torah. And the rest is its interpretation. Now go study. Now, I don't know about to you, but to my ears, that sounds a whole lot like what Jesus said in what we call the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Jesus wasn't doing away with 611 laws. He wasn't changing. He would have been disqualified as Messiah if he had even attempted to change the Torah. It's found in the book of Deuteronomy. That was one of the qualifications. If they try to take away Torah, he's not qualified to be Messiah. And if he's not qualified to be Messiah, then none of the rest of this even matters, right? Nothing that we're doing really matters if Jesus himself had tried to change or to abrogate any of the law. He said, I didn't come to abolish, I came to fulfill. Instead, what Jesus was doing was completely in line with first century Jewish thinking. It was a common practice for rabbinical teachers to explain Torah by summing it up, or to simplify it, to give the spirit behind it, to give the understanding, the overall philosophy of it. And so when Jesus says the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, that was the Shema, which all Jews quote every morning and every night. That was the first commandment, love God. The second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. So he wasn't adding anything new. He wasn't taking away. He was just summing up. One of the things that's extremely important to understand about Torah, or the instruction, is that not all of the 613 commandments were applicable to everyone. What I mean by that is that there were some that were applicable only to women and some that were applicable only to men. There were some that were applicable to Levites only, and some to high priests only. Some were applicable only while living in the land of Israel. Some applicable only if there was a temple standing. So to say that Jesus did all the laws is pretty incorrect. He didn't do the laws pertaining to women because he wasn't a woman. He wasn't a Levite. He wasn't a high priest in the Levitical lineage. He wasn't a father. He wasn't a husband. So there were a lot of categories of laws that Jesus didn't accomplish because it didn't apply to him. So if we really want to understand the mindset of the Bible, of the writers of the New Testament, we have to understand that even to this day in Judaism, in Jewish thinking, Torah, the instruction of God, is a blessing, not a curse. It's a gift. It's something sacred. It's an honor to be entrusted with the instruction of God, to work with God instead of strive against Him. It's a blessing, not something to try to wiggle your way out of or try to find loopholes, or certainly not something to be done away with. It's God's user manual, if you will. It's God's instruction manual for how to live life successfully on this earth. Paul touches on this in Romans 9, 4 and 5. They are Israelites, and to them belong the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, or the instruction, or Torah, the worship, and the promises. To them belong the patriarchs, and from their race, according to the flesh, is the Christ, or the Messiah, who is God over all, blessed forever. In Jewish thinking, it's an honor to be given the instruction. It's an honor to be entrusted with knowing how to live a pleasing life to God, to know how to be successful on earth. Deuteronomy 6:24. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always. Deuteronomy 10:12 and 13. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments and statutes of the Lord, which I am commanding you today for your good. Joshua 1:7 and 8. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Don't turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. The book of the instruction shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it, for then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. So again, if we change our understanding, words matter. If we change our understanding from law to instruction, for me anyway, it completely changes the dynamic of what we're dealing with. No longer is it something that's burdensome to try to get out from under. No longer is it something that's, God forbid, evil or a curse. It's something that is an honor that brings us blessing. Paul even has this to say in Romans 7:12 and 14. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good. For we know that the law, the instruction, the Torah, is spiritual. In the next chapter, Romans 8, verse 7, he says, for the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's instruction. Indeed, it cannot. So everybody wants to be spiritual these days, inside the church and outside. Oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, or I'm not under legal. I'm not into all that religious stuff, and I'm not legal. According to Paul, the law itself, the instruction, the Torah, this is revealing his attitude. The Torah is holy, it's good, it's righteous, And most importantly, it's spiritual. It's not the spiritual person that disregards the law and lives however they want. It's the carnal mind that can't submit to God's teaching, to his instruction. It cannot, in Paul's writing, it cannot submit to God's instruction. Hebrews 8:10, quoting Jeremiah 31:33, says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds, I will put my instruction, my teaching into their minds, and write them on their hearts." Not the tablets of stone this time, right? It's the fleshly tables of our heart. He's going to write his instructions on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. If we want to be in the new covenant, if we want to say that we're new covenant believers, then we have to say that God has written his instruction on our heart. And if we rebel against his instruction, if we rebel against his commandments, are we really in the new covenant? 1 John 5:2-3. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. So again, I would encourage you, if you never have, maybe it's useful to go back and see what the actual instructions are. What are the actual commandments? All that boring stuff that we just want to skip over in Exodus, Leviticus, all that. What are the actual instructions that God has given? What are the 613 commandments all about? And if we don't even know the answer to that question, maybe we need to hold off judgment on some of the weightier topics concerning this. Matthew 5:17-19. This is Jesus speaking. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the instruction until all is accomplished." Now, if we're not careful, it's really easy to pass over that phrase, "until heaven and earth pass away," and just treat it as like some sort of throwaway line, or maybe Jesus is trying to be poetic, or maybe it's just a way of saying a really long time. But if we look at the end of Revelation, we see that is a very specific time that Jesus is referencing. We see that there is going to be a time where heaven and earth pass away, and that's at the end of the Messianic age, at the end of the millennial reign, the 1,000 years. Continuing on to verse 19, "Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." 1 John 3:4 is the last time that this word law is mentioned in the Bible, in the New Testament. "Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law." Other translations say sin is lawlessness, not having any law at all. So again, in this one short teaching, in this one video, we aren't trying to cover all the many aspects of this vast subject. All we're trying to do is to set the foundation of what this word actually means. Because once we get a better understanding of this word from a biblical perspective, what did they think about it? Not what do we think about it, what did they think about it? And once we do that, once we get a better understanding, then we can go on and formulate our opinions and our theologies about how we're supposed to relate to it now. So in closing, I just want to encourage you to continue to read and to study these things for yourself. See if I'm telling you the truth. Why take my word for it? Why take anybody's word for it? Do the research yourself. Do the studying. Do the digging for yourself, and see if these concepts really hold out to what we've been taught, to what our understanding is, to see if maybe there's a fuller picture. Maybe it'll confirm some things. But do continue to study the word for yourself. We're not trying to gain knowledge for its own sake, but hopefully we're gaining knowledge in order to get our mind aligned with God's, to take on the mind of Christ, to be conformed to his image. All those verses are saying the same thing. It's changing the way that we think. So hopefully this short video has helped to accomplish that in some small way, and inspires you to want to dig in and study the Word for yourself. Thanks for being with us today. We hope that it blessed you in some way. And until next time, God bless.